At the Royal Night School, Idyll was summoned to the teacher's office. There he was informed that he had been officially expelled. The teacher laid it out plainly. Idyll's grades, his behavior in class, his attendance, and everything else about him were unworthy of a prestigious knight academy. When Idyll questioned whether the teacher was essentially calling him a lazy good-for-nothing, he was told that if he had even a shred of determination, perhaps he could have turned out like his outstanding older brother. Idyll was stunned into silence, but the teacher wasn't done. He made it clear that Idyll's failure wasn't due to any mistake on the school's guidance. In defiance, Idyll asked whether the teacher was simply hurling insults to avoid responsibility. Still, he said there was no need to worry, as he had always seen things clearly and had never possessed the will to improve. The teacher, amused, remarked that perhaps Idyll still had a shred of decency in him. And with that, he dismissed him completely, noting that they didn't need a good-for-nothing like him in their school. Idyll said nothing more. He left the room unfazed, already thinking this was the end. He had once been a student of the Royal Night School, and he graduated magnificently. His family, the Jirahas, had been knights for generations. Naturally, he believed he would follow that path too. And yet, now he stood here questioning everything. How had it come to this? As he walked through the corridors, he imagined what others must be thinking. He was the dropout, now expelled, born into a prestigious martial bloodline, yet entirely devoid of talent. And to make things worse, he was the younger brother of the genius Zekt Walis. In contrast, he had only brought disgrace to the knight's legacy. Why couldn't he simply disappear? Not just from the school, but from the world itself. Idyll could only walk in silence, glancing back one last time at the place that had cast him out. There was one more thing Idyll had to do: deliver the news to his father. As expected, the head of the prestigious Jiraha house erupted in anger when he learned that Idyll had been expelled. In his fury, he called him a useless piece of trash. He informed Idyll that his brother, Zekt Walis, was about to become the youngest knight captain in history. His other brother, Exar, had graduated from the night school as the top student and had already been appointed as a knight. It could be called decent progress. Compared to that, Idyll had only betrayed his father's expectations. His father reminded him that both of his brothers had been exceptional since they were young, surpassing even adults. Idyll, on the other hand, could barely manage to keep up without losing. He couldn't even maintain decent grades at the night school, and now he had been expelled. Burying his face in his hands, Idyll's father said he had had enough. Someone as incompetent as Idyll had to be disowned. He even remarked that he should have done it much earlier. He told Idyll to consider all ties with the family severed. He was to leave and never come back. Bro really walked in for a conversation and walked out an orphan. Idyll stood frozen, accepting his fate. In truth, this response was exactly what he had expected. To his father, a son who couldn't become a knight had no worth. Idyll acknowledged his father's words and relinquished the Jiraha surname. He thanked his father for everything, though deep down he felt a strange sense of relief at the start of a new life. As he exited the room, he was immediately met by his younger sister. She asked where he was going, but Idyll didn't answer, and he simply said sorry. As he left their home, Idyll thought to himself that he wasn't worried about his sister and mother. Zarga would surely take care of them. Now, with both his home and school lost, Idyll was left wondering where he should go next. As Idyll navigated through the bustling streets, he decided to step into a nearby pub. Inside, a drunk old man called out to him, noticing how gloomy he looked. Idyll was about to respond, but the man went on to say he couldn't help but laugh. Idyll lightly noted that being laughed at like that would only make him more annoyed. As the old man continued laughing, Idyll realized that he was actually a big shot from the Adventurers Guild. Not wanting to ruin the mood, Idyll chose to play along. While walking around the pub, memories of his time at the night school came rushing back. Because of a certain trigger, he had given up on becoming a knight. Back then, he had felt completely hopeless and out of control. Just then, as he passed by a group of boys, he accidentally brushed arms with one of them. One of the boys called out to him, but Idyll didn't stop. Suddenly, the boy grabbed him by the collar, tauntingly asking if he had anything to say. He demanded an apology, but Idyll stayed silent. Without warning, Idyll punched him, shouting that it was the boy who came at him. Dude picked the wrong sad boy to mess with. The sudden fight caused a stir in the pub, but before things could escalate further, someone stepped in and told Idyll to drop it. It was the drunk man from earlier. The old man placed a hand on Idyll's arm, noting that he was quite the hot-blooded youngster. Meanwhile, Idyll was stunned, realizing that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move his body. Just then, the old man insisted on taking care of Idyll, much to the boy's annoyance. That night, the old man brought Idyll to his home. There, he asked for the young man's name, and Idyll answered politely. The old man acknowledged his skills, though Idyll didn't think much of them. Then, the old man said that if Idyll couldn't handle that kind of power, he should direct it elsewhere. He suggested becoming an adventurer, a suggestion that left Idyll momentarily stunned. The adventurer business, which Idyll had initially pursued just to vent his frustration, turned out to suit him more than he expected. He He threw himself into it completely, neglecting his night training in the process. His absences increased and his grades plummeted. Trying to lift Idyll's spirits, the old man explained that his loud, explosive laughter was his way of reminding others not to be too discouraged. But Idyll wasn't discouraged, at least not in the way people thought. Then the old man mentioned that the party he had temporarily joined the other day had specifically asked him to approach Idyll. They wanted him to join their team, impressed by how well he handled himself. Idyll was shocked to hear it. The old man burst into laughter, saying that surprisingly, there were a few nobles who actually became adventurers, some even rising to A rank. On the other hand, there were also those who ended up bowing their heads in shame, called back home by their fallen noble families. Though the offer sounded nice, Idyll asked the old man to politely decline it. The old man was surprised, asking if Idyll truly wanted to live as an adventurer. Idyll explained that there was something else he wanted to try, and for that reason he preferred to continue working alone a while longer. The old man asked if it was about the original magic Idyll had been researching. Idyll confirmed it, explaining that it was called the bond summoning technique, and he intended to start training to master it. Because of that, he couldn't participate in any party activities. The old man acknowledged that this was Idyll's life to live as he chose, but he still wondered how Idyll planned to make a living. Idyll replied that he still had the reward money from the wyvern subjugation the other day, so he'd be fine. The old man was shocked, knowing that hunting a wyvern was something only B-rank parties and above typically did. Idyll confirmed it, explaining that he had simply joined a B-rank party for the task. What, like it's hard? He seemed to have a talent for reading others and matching their pace, easily adapting to any party he joined. However, he didn't think it was much of a skill, especially compared to his genius older brothers. That was why he had to follow his own path. The old man understood, but asked if Idyll was planning to hole up in the mountains. Idyll responded that he was heading to the world's strongest magical domain, a harsh frontier that people could barely set foot in, the Idyll Great Tree Sea. The Idyll Great Tree Sea was said to be larger than the entire country Idyll lived in. However, its full extent remained unknown. Powerful magical creatures, unlike any found elsewhere, roamed freely within. It was recognized as the world's magic domain, and the border between it and the outside world was often referred to as the end of the world. The old man screamed in concern, begging Idyll to stop. He asked if Idyll understood how many adventurers had entered the Idyll Great Tree Sea and never returned. He pleaded with Idyll not to give up on himself, but Idyll only replied that he was different and that he wasn't going to die. He knew full well that the Great Tree Sea was not to be taken lightly. A few days later, Idyll arrived at the border town of Botrinus. The area bordering the Idyll Great Tree Sea was heavily fortified with a massive fortress, clearly marking how dangerous the place was. Beyond that wall lay the Great Tree Sea of Idyll. As Idyll stood at its edge, he sighed and reminded himself of his goal, to complete the bond magic. Back when Idyll first became an adventurer, he studied various types of magic, but in the end, all of it felt half-hearted. Around that time, a mysterious bard approached him. The bard said Idyll had talent. He could do all that he wanted, but he could never reach the pinnacle of anything. It was as if he had been born under such a star. Offended, Idyll asked if the bard was looking for a fight, but the bard didn't argue. Instead, he calmly said that there existed a secret art, something only Idyll could master, an ancient lost art that no one else could perform. The bard then sat down across from Idyll, telling him not to be so cautious. He explained that this secret art existed in a completely different dimension from the magic currently known in the world. He called it the bond summoning technique, an ancient lost magic he had personally named. Just then, Idyll asked if this man expected him to pay for lessons or buy bitter old textbooks. However, the bard simply said that if Idyll could show him results with this secret art, that would be more than enough. Idyll remained suspicious, but at the time he had nothing to devote himself to. For that reason, he shook the bard's hand in agreement. Days passed, and Idyll eventually learned the basics of bond magic, but by the time he had completed his training, the bard had vanished. Now Idyll stepped into the forest, reminding himself that he came here to practice bond magic. That was his purpose. As he moved forward, he began observing his surroundings carefully. He could sense that something was watching him. He turned toward the rustling sounds, threatening whatever was there to show itself. But instead of an enemy, what appeared was a slime, peeking out from behind a tree with its large, googly eyes. Both Idyll and the slime were equally startled, and they shrieked in surprise at the same time. Idyll hadn't expected to see a slime here, especially not in a place as harsh and wild as the Great Tree Sea. The slime was known as the most popular, lowest-ranking, and weakest magical creature, a semi-transparent, gel-like being that could be found almost anywhere. Despite its low rank, it was known for its high versatility. Then, without warning, the slime suddenly rushed toward Idyll. He was shocked by how fast it was, but he was faster, managing to dodge the attack just in time. As the slime landed, it seemed to mutter something about making Idyll fall. The day went on and the two continued to fight relentlessly. By the end of it, Idyll dropped to his knees, exhausted, claiming victory. This slime's strength was unlike anything he had encountered before. It made sense. This was the great tree sea of Idyll after all. He stood up, looming over the creature. It was still alive, though barely. Its tired eyes looked up at him, mumbling incomprehensible sounds. Idyll figured it was fine if it was still breathing, and he hadn't delivered a finishing blow yet. At that moment, he decided to try the bond summoning technique on it. Chanting the spell, he began forming the bond. His magic intertwined with the slime's life force, connecting them on a deep level. Neither was superior, and they stood as equals, bound by a sincere pact. Afterward, Idyll cast another spell to stabilize the forming magic pathway. He hoped to gain the slime's aid and officially form a contract. With that, the bond was sealed. Suddenly, the slime bounced with energy, letting out joyful noises. Idyll smirked, knowing his magic had fully healed it. He then checked on the slime, wondering how it was feeling. If the spell worked, the slime would now be his friend, and no harm would ever come to it. The slime paused for a moment, seemingly thinking. Then out of nowhere, it slammed itself into Idyll's gut. Shocked by the sudden hit, Idyll began to worry that the bond summoning technique had failed. But the slime continued to bounce around happily, as if overflowing with excitement. It wasn't hostile at all. If anything, it behaved like a playful dog. Realizing this, Idyll suddenly stood up and shouted in joy. The spell had worked. The slime also celebrated, making strange but cheerful noises. Idyll knelt down to meet its gaze and quietly asked it to take care from now on. The first stage was a success. In this form, the bond resembled a demon tamer's pact or summoning magic. But Idyll recalled the bard's words that bond magic was an ancient secret technique, fundamentally different from the others. Traditional summoning spells called forth spirits, phantom beasts, or demons. However, bond summoning targeted something else entirely, beings that shouldn't exist in this world, creatures from a lost world. At its core, the essence of bond summoning was about forging a true connection, starting with forming bonds with monsters. The bard once told Idyll that the bond summoning technique, commonly known as bond magic, shouldn't exist in this world. It had the power to summon inanimate objects and was the only known method of bringing things from the lost world into this one. In other words, summoning from another world could lead to the discovery of unknown minerals or strange unfamiliar properties. Since it hadn't even been passed down as legend, it was clear that this wouldn't be something easily understood or mastered. The developer of the bond summoning technique must have taken that into consideration, a yosuga capable of summoning things that shouldn't exist in this world. Idyll realized that this might refer to an entity, which surprised the bard because Idyll had figured it out. That yosuga was the slime, his contracted monster, a being considered to be from beyond this world. Bond magic relied on the connection with a monster as the foundation to summon substances that didn't exist in this world. At that moment, Idyll asked the slime to lend him some of its power. The slime agreed, and the bond summon began. Then, something unexpected happened. Idyll discovered he could summon a water pet bottle. He understood the word water, but the rest of the words didn't make sense to him. The slime tried to explain, but its language was mere gibberish. A screen appeared asking if the item should be summoned. Though unsure, Idyll agreed. Just then, a bottle appeared in his hand, startling him. It was cylindrical and crystal-like, with a texture unlike anything he'd ever felt. The slime continued to make noises, and eventually, Idyll understood what it wanted. He held the tip and twisted it. To his surprise, the top spun off, and he realized it was some sort of cap. He had never seen anything like it before. Water itself was familiar, but this water was completely clear with no scent at all. As he tasted it, his eyes widened in shock. It was cold and delicious. Amazed, Idyll offered some to the slime. It jumped with joy, and he poured the water over it, instantly soothing the creature. At that moment, Idyll realized just how precious water truly was. During his adventures, they would often choose base locations based on nearby water sources. If the water ran out, the quest would come to a halt. But now, as long as his magic held out, Idyll could summon water any time, removing that worry entirely. Still, he wondered if the pet water bottle would disappear once the water inside ran out. Then, another thought came to him. If he could form contracts with more monsters and increase the types of bond summons available, he might be able to summon even more impressive things. With that goal in mind, he decided to challenge various monsters. Later that day, Idyll ventured deeper into the forest. He had just defeated a massive snake, which confirmed that he and the slime made an excellent team. Confident, Idyll attempted to form a bond with the snake. However, a screen appeared informing him that his summoning magic level was too low. At present, he could only form a contract with one monster. Realizing this, Idyll understood that he needed to level up before forming more bonds. Determined, he set his sights on battling more monsters to gain experience. The slime, eager to help, bounced with excitement at the prospect of leveling up together. Meanwhile, at the Royal Night School, Idyll's teacher, Saragesta, boldly announced that he had good news. Idyll had been expelled. He declared that Idyll had been deemed unfit for the prestigious school due to his lack of talent and ambition. Though this news was somewhat late, he felt it necessary to inform everyone. In his view, the presence of a dropout must have been unpleasant to witness. He believed it was a teacher's duty to create the best possible environment for students, and under his guidance any student could grow into a splendid knight. At that moment, Prince Mashuhada, clearly uninterested, responded coldly. He already knew everything the old man was yapping about. He was aware of all his foolish actions. It had been 5 days since Idyll's departure, and it was more than enough time for the information to spread. At that point, even the castle rats knew the tea. Saragesta stammered, unable to respond properly in front of the prince, who was not only the top student at the school but also the 4th prince of the kingdom, the most elite among elites. Saragesta couldn't understand why someone of his status would care about a lowly student like Idyll. Trying to diffuse the tension, he laughed and pretended it was expected from the prince, saying it was no surprise that even trash could catch his eye. He went on to flatter him, declaring that the nation's future was already in good hands and that he was honored to serve under such a remarkable prince. However, the prince remained unmoved. Mashuhada looked at him with disgust, stating how unfortunate it was to be assigned such an incompetent teacher. Pops just got clocked. Insulted, Saragesta called the prince rude. Despite his royal status, he reminded him that he was currently just a student at the night school. He warned that defying a teacher could negatively impact his grades. Yet, Prince Mashuhada remained firm. To him, there was nothing wrong with calling incompetence what it was. He believed that failing to recognize Idyll's hidden talent was the clearest proof of Saragesta's own lack of skill. Furious, Saragesta cursed under his breath. In his eyes, Idyll was nothing more than a low-tier student, unmotivated and holding the lowest grades. No one could compare the school's top talents to someone like Idyll. Just then, Prince Mashuhada revealed something unexpected. He had been watching Idyll for a long time. He knew of the famed title, the 13th Golden Generation, and believed that Idyll was the one who truly deserved to be its golden example. Though he had pretended to be a weak student, he possessed incredible talent. From the 1st to the 3rd year, he was always second, right behind the prince himself. But from the 4th year onward, he had lost all motivation. The prince admitted he didn't know what caused the change, but he hoped to help Idyll recover and become a splendid knight once more. When he asked Saragesta if he had any idea why he wanted to help Idyll, the old man was left speechless. Finally, Prince Mashuhada revealed his reasons. He was the 4th prince of the country, and seeking out exceptional talent for the good of the nation was only natural. Prince Mashuhada firmly believed that Idyll was without a doubt the one who could become the strongest knight to support the country. And yet, Saragesta had tried to expel him. To the prince, the incompetent always stood in the way of others. Saragesta was stunned, unable to respond. Eventually, he managed to speak, asking if perhaps the prince was overestimating Idyll. He admitted he might not know Idyll's past performance, but insisted that his current record was undeniably the worst. After all, everything came down to visible evaluations. The prince wasn't impressed with what he said. To him, being able to grasp what was unseen was a mark of true competence. He then asked Saragesta if he even knew why Idyll had been skipping class, or where he went during that time. Confused, the teacher had no answer. That's when the prince revealed the truth. Idyll had been involved with the Adventurers Guild. He was being evaluated as a B-rank adventurer unofficially. Saragesta scoffed, thinking Idyll was a fool for doing such a thing. But the achievements were real, for an investigator had confirmed it. Just the other day, Idyll had reportedly succeeded in defeating a wyvern party. Saragesta was in disbelief. He couldn't think of many in the capital's Knight Brigade who could pull that off. Just then, Prince Mashuhada pointed out how much the old man talked, despite knowing so little. Saragesta stammered, while the prince continued, saying that Idyll's only flaw was that he had lost faith in himself. He had given up on the path of knighthood. But if Idyll were truly a knight meant to serve the country, then the right to fail him belonged to the country itself, meaning that he, a member of the royal family, could pass that judgment. Idyll had already petitioned the king to become Prince Mashuhada's direct knight after graduation, regardless of grades. The prince had intended to train him personally. Saragesta could hardly believe the king had agreed, but then the prince looked at him with fury in his eyes, declaring that the teacher's foolish actions had ruined everything. Now the prince declared that he would charge Saragesta with treason for obstructing the will of the royal family. He told the man that his time as a teacher at the night school was over. Starting next month, Saragesta would be nothing more than a commoner soldier stationed at a remote fortress. Desperate, Saragesta collapsed to the floor. He begged, saying he had spent his entire life building his career, only to be reduced to guarding some remote land. Bro fumbled so bad he became an NPC. However, the prince simply smirked. He thought to himself that he had no intention of abandoning Idyll. He would make sure that his strength served the nation. Idyll continued his mission in the Idyll Great Tree Sea. During his time there, he deepened his bond with the slime, teaching it tricks. At first glance, it might have looked like they were just playing around, but this was also a way to strengthen their friendship level. He could eventually form a bond summon with the slime by doing so. Soon after, Idyll used the bond summoning technique. Their bond had reached level 6, granting them the ability to summon water attributes. The summoning technique had advanced significantly too. Now he could summon water directly anytime and anywhere he needed it. He realized that he was in much better condition than he had ever imagined. From musty adventurer to minty fresh legend, he was getting used to life in the Great Tree Sea. Still, Idyll admitted that the bond summoning technique had its limitations. However, due to the unique nature of the forest, the technique's level had increased. Not only that, the number of monsters he could contract with had also grown. He now had the ability to form new bonds with other creatures. Without hesitation, he attempted to create a new contract, but to his surprise, a system notification appeared reporting an error. Certain conditions hadn't been met. It seemed that monster contracts weren't just about casting the spell, the monsters also had to mentally accept him. Without that mutual recognition, no bond could be formed, no matter how much he desired it. He had initially tried to defeat the slime before bonding with it, assuming that was the standard method used by monster tamers. However, bond summoning was clearly an entirely different process. Idyll played with the slime again, realizing just how lucky he was to have formed a bond with it. In that moment, he made a decision. Rather than overthinking things, he would take action and try different approaches. He held the slime to his face, telling his plan. Then, suddenly, the slime became alert. It stiffened, as if trying to warn him of incoming danger. Idyll looked around, confused, and asked if there were enemies nearby. Scanning his surroundings, Idyll was shocked to see a group of goblins lurking nearby. One goblin wouldn't have been a problem, but this was a group. He tried to sneak away quietly, but a misstep made just enough noise to draw their attention. They noticed him, making Idyll freeze on the spot. It was always the same with these humanoid monsters. Goblins were wicked, vile, and arrogant. They didn't defend territory. They invaded human settlements, destroyed fields, and attacked livestock. Even worse, they sometimes targeted human children, abducting them for cruel entertainment before eventually killing them. Goblins were the type of monster that had to be eliminated on sight. Idyll hadn't expected to find them living in the Idyll near Great Tree Sea as well. If he had been noticed, he had no choice but to act. Idyll sheathed his sword, fully aware that goblins weren't particularly strong on their own. However, when gathered in a group, their coordination could be shockingly effective. Then, out of nowhere, Idyll realized he had been completely surrounded. It was just Idyll and the slime, standing alone against the entire horde. A desperate crisis. The goblins bared their razor-sharp teeth in sinister grins, confident that they had cornered their prey. However, Idyll had no intention of backing down. The goblins might have seen them as weak, but they were wrong. He turned to the slime, relying on their bond. In response, the slime leapt into the air, allowing Idyll to perform the bond summoning technique. From it, they produced a strange liquid called lotion, and dumped it all over the goblins. At first, the goblins were merely confused by the slippery substance, but they quickly realized it wasn't dangerous. However, just as they prepared to strike again, they lost their footing and slipped. That's when Idyll understood that the liquid scattered earlier by the slime wasn't ordinary water. Thanks to the increased level of the technique, it was now possible to summon lotion from another world. Sticky and slick, it wasn't meant for drinking. Wait till he realizes what else it's good for. It clung to the skin, making it difficult to stand or move. It couldn't be wiped off with a simple gesture. Even though the goblins were smart enough to gather in groups, they lacked the caution to avoid such traps. Seeing his chance, Idyll moved fast. He grabbed a sharp piece of wood and used it as a makeshift spear. Without hesitation, he struck, impaling goblins one after another until half the horde had been wiped out. One of the goblins appeared to beg for its life, letting out desperate, unintelligible sounds, but Idyll only smirked, asking if it were asking to be spared. Then, without mercy, he told the goblin that its begging was pointless. He knew the iron rule when it came to goblins. If encountered, they must be eliminated without exception. Just then, the slime alerted Idyll that danger was looming. Idyll asked what was wrong. Then, to his shock, he noticed that a goblin was attacking from a blind spot. The goblin landed in front of Idyll, distracting him. While Idyll was preoccupied, the rest of the horde quickly retreated. Strangely, the lone goblin showed no fear. It simply sat there, as if waiting to be killed quickly. Idyll noticed that the goblin's companions had abandoned it. Goblins were known for being wicked. They formed groups, but it was to gain the upper hand against their enemies and not out of camaraderie. To Idyll's confusion, this goblin came to rescue its companions even when it was in a tight spot. That moment made Idyll pause, realizing that maybe this goblin had the capacity to form bonds. He decided to use the bond summoning technique on it, and to his shock, the goblin began to speak. The goblin questioned why Idyll didn't finish her off. Meanwhile, Idyll could hardly believe what he was hearing. It had to be the effect of the technique. Suddenly, the goblin sensed something was wrong. She realized she could understand human speech and panicked, confused about what was happening to him. The goblin wondered if this was some kind of domination magic. She lamented that a proud goblin like her had fallen so far, reduced to being a mere familiar. Idyll, meanwhile, questioned if goblins even had pride. The goblin was deeply offended and insisted they did. Then Idyll tried another summon, now that he had a bond with the goblin. This time he was able to obtain a combat knife. Upon confirming the summon, the knife appeared, simple in design. The goblin was mesmerized by the glint of its silver blade. She marveled at how beautiful it looked, even reflecting his image. Testing it on a tree branch, she was stunned by how sharp it was. Raising the knife, she imagined how satisfying it would be to see a deep, gushing wound. The slime watched the goblin with concern while Idyll began to think it was probably a bad idea to let an idiot wield such a weapon. Without hesitation, he took the knife back. The goblin threw a tantrum, but Idyll calmly stated he would return it only when necessary. That alone was enough to excite the goblin. She eagerly called Idyll boss and asked if he truly meant it. Overjoyed, she even vowed to annihilate all humans and monsters alike. Idyll gave a small smile, realizing just how overly confident this creature really was. As the days went on, Idyll eventually allowed the goblin to use the knife as they continued leveling up. One fine day they shared a meal together, but the goblin began reporting disturbing details. She spoke enthusiastically about how sharp the knife was, noting how the arteries in an enemy's neck had burst, spurting blood. Annoyed, Idyll shut down the report, saying he'd heard enough. With their growing numbers, the battle in the Idyll near Great Tree Sea had progressed significantly. It was a coordinated strategy. Idyll and the slime cleared out blind spots, while the goblin exploited openings like an assassin. Their level continued to rise, and Idyll began to feel ready to bond with a new beast. Just then, the goblin claimed she had a good idea. Ahead was a hill-like area, currently claimed by a powerful monster. Her suggestion was to defeat the monster and make it Idyll's underling. Idyll asked if the opponent was truly strong, and the goblin reassured him that they could take it down together. Idyll hesitated, unsure if the intel was trustworthy. Eventually, he decided to check it out, but they would only fight if they had a good chance of winning. Later that day, they reached their destination. But upon arrival, Idyll was stunned upon knowing that the enemy the goblin mentioned was a gigantic golem. He immediately recognized the danger. Golems were more threatening than the wyvern he had defeated before. Its body was as hard as minerals, human-shaped, massive, and agile. It was already a formidable opponent and far more intelligent than a mere beast. Panic set in. They turned and ran as Idyll cursed the goblin for leading them into such a dire situation. The goblin, flustered, claimed she thought Idyll could handle it. Idyll knew there was no way they could defeat that thing, let alone make it an ally. Just then, he ordered a retreat to regroup and devise a new plan. The goblin tried to keep up, saying she understood. They managed to put some distance between themselves and the golem. Then, to Idyll's surprise, the golem stopped moving. He began to wonder if it would stop chasing them if they simply left the hill. That hope quickly vanished as the golem grabbed a massive tree trunk and prepared to launch it straight at them. Bros cooked. The golem hurled the massive tree trunk toward them, making Idyll scream in panic. Fortunately, they managed to dodge just in time. Idyll quickly checked to see if everyone was okay, and the goblin confirmed she was. To their horror, they suddenly noticed that the slime wasn't with them. It had been left behind, close to the golem itself. The slime was completely exhausted, and it could no longer move. If Idyll and the goblin didn't act fast, the golem would crush the slime underfoot. Without hesitation, Idyll rushed back toward the slime. The goblin warned him he might get crushed too, but Idyll didn't back down. He argued that he had spent so much time with the slime, so abandoning it was never an option. He questioned what kind of future awaited someone who would leave a friend behind just to survive. And so, Idyll ran with everything he had, reaching out desperately. At the last moment, he managed to grab the slime, pulling it out of harm's way. However, the danger was far from over. The golem still loomed above them, ready to kill. At that moment, Idyll realized there was no longer any escape. With only a 50-50 chance, he decided to take the risk and use the bond summoning technique on the golem. To his surprise, the golem suddenly stopped moving. Idyll took the opportunity to flee while he still could, but something stopped him mid-track. Something strange was happening. The golem began to emit a glowing light, and from within it, a girl appeared. The girl thanked Idyll for registering her, then introduced herself as Vol40T1CX2, a fully situational response-type automation model. She stated that serving her master was the joy of an automation, and she hoped Idyll would take good care of her. Idyll was stunned, wondering if the girl was actually the core of the golem. However, the girl clarified that the golem belonged to her. She referred to it as a combat enhancement armor model type giant. Her explanation only left Idyll more confused, unable to grasp half of what she was saying. She continued, mentioning that the golem had already operated for over 18.016 continuous hours. Still baffled, Idyll turned to his party to ask if anyone else understood what she was talking about. The girl then said that due to aging and deterioration, the golem's performance had dropped to less than half of its original capacity. In that state, it would be difficult to properly serve Idyll. While he didn't fully understand, Idyll did notice that the golem's outer body looked quite old and creaky. Just then, Idyll opened his screen, which caught the girl's attention. She asked what it was, and Idyll replied that he was thinking of using the bond they had just formed. To his surprise, the screen showed several summonable items now available. Among them, the Enhanced Armor type, the Giant Enhanced Armor type, and the Eagle Enhanced Armor type. The Enhanced Armor type Giant caught his attention. He selected it, and the armor automatically applied itself to the golem, renewing its appearance and restoring it to a brand new state. The girl was amazed by her master's decision, marveling that they could now bring out the golem's maximum specs. Idyll, now a bit more composed, admitted that he had a few questions to clear up. He wondered aloud if the girl was around 20 years old, observing the features of her body. My boy knows his priorities. Before she could respond, he looked away, distracted and confused about who she really was. More specifically, why she had been inside the golem. The girl asked why he turned away, but Idyll didn't answer. He knew it wouldn't be appropriate to admit that her outfit was quite erotic. She then explained that she was an automation designed to mimic the female human body. About 2,000 years ago, this land was home to a vast ancient civilization, and she was a robot created by that civilization. A doll that could think and act on her own. Her mission had been to guard an important facility on this hill. Even after the civilization fell and the facility was reclaimed by the Earth, she continued to protect the land. But now, she had found a new reason to exist. She would dedicate all her functions to Idyll. Startled by how close she suddenly was, Idyll could only hope that she'd take care of him too. At that moment, he realized that when he had extended his hand to form the contract, perhaps he'd felt her desire to serve. Just then, the girl turned serious and made a request. She wanted a name. Idyll was surprised, and the girl explained that her model number was only her machine's name. What she desired was a personal name, one she could carry as the automation who served her master. Idyll tried to come up with a good name. Since the girl was technically a golem, he wanted to use that as the base, but with a cuter twist. Eventually, he decided on the name Golene. Golene smiled and gratefully accepted it, saying it was a wonderful name. Suddenly, the goblin got angry, reminding Golene that she was her senior. She furiously demanded to know why Idyll was only naming newcomers, claiming it was unfair favoritism. Even the slime seemed to agree, muttering strange sounds only it could understand. Idyll was unimpressed by their reaction, but he admitted they were just as unique and irreplaceable as Golene. So he decided to give them names as well, saying it wasn't too late. The goblin and the slime were visibly excited. Idyll turned to the slime first and named it Slappy, inspired by the peculiar noises it made. Slappy's eyes sparkled as it uttered unintelligible sounds, clearly thrilled. Idyll was glad the name made it happy. Next, he turned to the goblin and named her Goblina. Though Goblina was surprised that Idyll had chosen a name so quickly, she thought it was perfect. To her, the lack of hesitation meant the name was fit. And so it was done. The slime was named Slappy, the goblin was Goblina, and the golem was Golene. It took him months to brainstorm those names. With the addition of these three, Idyll's progress in mastering the bond summoning technique rapidly advanced. Then came a surprise. The screen informed Idyll that the rank of his bond summoning technique had been upgraded. He was confused. Why did the rank increase but not the level? Golene speculated that it was due to the act of naming. Idyll's technique depended on the strength of the bond with the contractor, a rare method. The stronger the bond, the more power it could exert in the world. Idyll was shocked as he realized that naming them had deepened the bond. At that moment, the screen announced that composite bond summoning was now possible. Idyll tested it immediately, and the resulting summon was a chainsaw. Golene explained that it was a tool used for cutting trees. When activated, the chain would rotate its blade. Before Idyll tried it out, Golene advised her to insert it slowly. That's what she said. Idyll wasted no time, and he turned on the chainsaw and used it to cut down a tree successfully. Goblina was amazed and eagerly asked if she could try as well. Idyll agreed but warned her to be careful. Filled with excitement, Goblina began chopping trees at full speed. Idyll, watching this unfold, questioned what the goblin's goal even was. At that moment, Golene suggested they build a house, and Idyll fully supported the idea. Using the wood Goblina had chopped, he built a log house in no time. When it was finished, Goblina jumped in joy and said it was fun. Seeing it all come together, Idyll felt a sense of accomplishment. Settling down in the forest would allow him to deepen the bond summoning technique even further. Golene praised Idyll, saying he was perfect in combat, magic, and knowledge. However, Idyll remained humble, mentioning that he had already built a log house during a previous quest. Even so, he was exhausted. To recover, he instructed Slappy to perform a bond summon for water. Cold water suddenly sprinkled all over Idyll's body, instantly refreshing him. Then he noticed Golene giving him a strange look. She questioned his actions and Idyll explained that he was sweating, so he decided to take a water bath. He quickly apologized, realizing he had undressed in front of a woman. Golene didn't just have an issue with that. She had concerns about his entire approach. Idyll admitted she had a point. He figured if he had kept his clothes on, it could have counted as doing laundry, like hitting two birds with one stone. Golene made it clear that this wasn't the case at all. She confronted him politely and made it clear that his approach was not cultural. Cleanliness wasn't just about the person, and it was about the surroundings too. Idyll didn't quite get it at first, but Golene insisted they needed to build a proper bath. He argued that it would be too much work. They'd need to boil water every time and gather firewood. But Golene calmly reassured him that she already had a plan. Soon after, Golene began constructing the bath. First, she dug a wide, deep hole in the ground. With her golem armor on, the excavation was completed in no time. Idyll asked if it was meant to hold water, worried it would just seep into the ground. However, Golene told him not to worry. She then called Goblina and instructed her to take some stones and pack them all over the hole like a cover. After that, she had Slappy pour a thick, drippy substance over the stones. This substance was cement. Once it hardened, it would be as tough as rock, durable even if it were hit. This was a result of her and Slappy's combined bond summoning ability. Just then, she had Slappy repeat the process for the other side of the hole. Idyll was impressed but slightly uneasy at the idea that they might have tested their combined summon on him without his consent. Once everything was in place, they had to wait for the cement to dry, a process that took a long time. Eventually, when the cement had set, Slappy filled the bath with water. Idyll wanted it to be hot, so Golene used a mana-based heat source to warm it up. As steam rose from the water, Idyll was speechless. Golene happily gestured for him to enter, unaware that the water was literally boiling. After a while, Idyll settled into the bath. He noted that Golene seemed to have some inconsistencies in her awareness. It took time to adjust the temperature, but eventually the water was just right. The view from the bath was peaceful, surrounded by greenery, and being outdoors made it feel even better. Then, to his shock, a voice commented on how honored they were that the bath met Idyll's standards. It was Golene now soaking in the bath with him, completely naked. "It's about to get steamy, folks," pun intended. Golene called upon Idyll, stating that a private bath might be lonely, so she had come to join him. She believed it was an automation's duty to attend to their master. Meanwhile, Idyll panicked upon realizing she had no clothes on. Golene explained that she had removed them, as bathing while dressed would violate common sense. Idyll was stunned by her logic, thinking this was exactly the kind of situation that required common sense. He questioned whether automations could even remove their clothes. Golene clarified that she was an all-situations response automation, designed to perform a wide range of duties. Idyll was confused by what she meant by duty, and most of all, what taking off her clothes and being naked had to do with anything. Golene went on to explain that female-type automations were equipped with functions meant to satisfy pleasure-based desires. For that reason, their structure was modeled after an adult human female, accurate down to the smallest detail. Idyll completely freaked out, and to make things worse, Golene stood up in the bath, fully exposing herself. She invited Idyll to see those details for himself. She hit him with the open house special. Horrified, he pushed her back into the water, insisting that he already believed her. There was no reason to doubt her explanation. Golene was touched by his reaction, expressing genuine happiness that her master trusted her so much. After 2,000 years, she never imagined meeting someone so kind. Meanwhile, Idyll couldn't understand why his response had moved her so deeply. Just then, Golene leaned in closer, gently reminding him that her service functions were available at any time. As Idyll questioned his own rationality, Goblina and Slappy suddenly appeared, asking what he was doing. Idyll tried to explain himself but only stuttered, which made him look even more suspicious. Meanwhile, a pack of wolves gathered near the house, watching Idyll and the others from a distance. One of the wolves reported that the giant on the hill had vanished. Now was the time to take what they sought. That superior land was truly worthy of being under their control. Another wolf mentioned that during reconnaissance, someone had already infiltrated the hill. A third added that Idyll and his companions were showing signs of building homes and settling in. The pack leader grew furious, insisting that it didn't matter. If there were inhabitants, they would simply be driven out. The weak would be taken. That was the law of the Great Tree. Back in the bath, Idyll desperately tried to explain that everything was a misunderstanding. He claimed Golene had just shown up and was troubled. Goblina and Slappy didn't look convinced, and Goblina pointed out that he had even been grinning earlier. As they argued, Golene suddenly stood up, her demeanor turning serious. She warned Idyll to be on guard as something was heading their way. She had detected multiple hostile signatures and insisted that they prepare for a counterattack. Idyll was startled by the news, while Goblina seemed excited because it had been a while since she'd fought. The group quickly dressed and got ready. Moments later, a pack of large, sturdy wolves appeared. Their leader stepped forward, declaring that the giants had finally disappeared. He introduced herself as Urshiva, pack leader of the jail wolf tribe. Idyll was surprised that the wolves could speak the human language, which only meant they were an intelligent species. He then asked what had brought them there and, more importantly, why they came in such numbers. With a smirk, he remarked that there was no food, or perhaps they saw him as the food. Urshiva dismissed the idea of eating a human, stating they didn't come for Idyll but for the hill. This land had long been desired by many races. Since ancient times, the giants had claimed it and never left, making it unreachable. But now that the giants were gone, it was only natural to take the land if no one owned it. Brownie really went with finders keepers. Urshiva claimed that the jail wolf tribe had been the first to detect the giants' disappearance, and the qualifications for a new ruler were in place. Just then, Golene quickly stepped forward, stating that the rightful owner of the land had already been decided. It was none other than her master. She declared that a mere canine daring to intrude on her master's domain was outrageous. With a stern warning, she told Urshiva to leave immediately and that she would not repeat herself. However, Urshiva remained defiant, saying that a weak human claiming territory was laughable. If that were the case, she would crush their heads and take their lives along with the land. Hearing this, Golene turned to Idyll, asking for permission to fight. Idyll gave the signal, and he equipped the golem with the enhanced armor-type giant. Golene warned the wolves that dying in arrogance was foolish. Even a coward who lived would be wiser. Now she would make them understand. The golem appeared in its full glory, shocking Urshiva. Without delay, Golene unleashed her power, striking down the wolves in one swift move. She then scuffed Urshiva and handed him over to Idyll, stating that judgment should come from her master. Just then, Urshiva fearlessly demanded to be killed. Proud wolves never lived to suffer shame after defeat. In battle, they were meant to fall gloriously and leave behind the pride of the lone wolf for future generations. Meanwhile, Idyll found this to be impossible. The other wolves were covered in wounds, yet not a single one attempted to run away. It was a troublesome situation because, unlike usual, his opponent was a sentient being. Just then, an idea struck him. Idyll suggested forming a contract with Urshiva. If he turned her into a bond-summon beast, she could become his companion. It was a way to ensure safety without killing the enemy. Golene immediately interrupted, questioning whether it was really so easy to grant someone the honor of following her. Urshiva, on the other hand, was confused by whatever Golene was yapping about. Idyll clarified that he would become Urshiva's new master. The idea baffled her, thinking that a weak-looking human couldn't possibly be under the command of a giant. However, Idyll told her that there was no need to put it that way. Just then, he simply proceeded to form the bond. In an instant, Urshiva transformed. Her body shifted into a demi-human form, stunning Idyll and the others who witnessed it. A wolf just literally turned into a beautiful human. Idyll asked why Urshiva had taken on a human form. She replied that, in order to serve her master more deeply, she had adopted a similar appearance. Idyll had never heard of such a thing. With Golene residing inside the golem, he was able to accept her, but he couldn't understand why the proud wolf had transformed into a beautiful girl. Urshiva smiled, declaring that she represented the Urshiva wolf tribe and would now serve him wholeheartedly. She began fangirling over Idyll, admiring him as a mighty warrior who had defeated and subjugated giants. By joining under his protection, her clan would surely be safe. Idyll tried to clarify that he hadn't actually defeated the giant, but Urshiva seemed too lost in admiration to listen. And just like that, a new companion had joined Idyll's team. The next day, Idyll was petting one of the wolves, rubbing its belly. The wolf was so pleased it looked like it wanted to be petted forever. Suddenly, Urshiva loomed over Idyll, demanding that her belly be petted too, just like her subordinates. Idyll was completely caught off guard and insisted that touching her in that form was forbidden. Just then, Golene interrupted, warning that their master was in trouble. She complained that the beasts were absolutely relentless, and now, they even seemed to be staying for good. As Urshiva cozied up to Idyll, he agreed that Golene had a point. In fact, the beasts were increasing in number all at once. At that moment, Idyll noticed Slappy playing with the wolves, using water to entertain them. It warmed his heart to see the slime getting along so well with them. Urshiva was impressed by the slime's ability to produce water under Idyll's command. She became even more convinced. Idyll was the one worthy of becoming the ruler of the forest. To her, the wolves who pledged loyalty to a noble were the true victors. Golene, on the other hand, questioned what nonsense the newcomer was rambling about. Idyll was equally confused. He didn't understand why Urshiva kept calling him a king. He began to wonder if territorial disputes in the Great Tree Sea were really that intense. Hearing this, Urshiva stood up and began to explain. The Great Forest was home to some truly powerful foes. There were the great sea tribes, orcs, and goblins. The vermin hordes were among the lesser tribes. Of course, there was the jail wolf tribe. Among them all, the demon beast tribes stood as the main forces. Suddenly, Urshiva turned serious, suspecting that the other tribes might already have their eyes on this territory, and so she warned Idyll to remain vigilant. Meanwhile, Goblina was fuming at Urshiva. She felt that this newcomer was acting all high and mighty. If her goal was to make the master stronger, then they should form contracts with all the wolves. However, Urshiva protested, explaining that this wasn't allowed. Only the leader of the group had the privilege of forming a direct bond with the Lord, and she couldn't allow her subordinates to do what Goblina suggested. Goblina suddenly smirked, pointing out that she also had a contract with Idyll, which made them equals. Urshiva was baffled that a goblin like her would think that. Idyll then stepped in, saying that having more contracts didn't necessarily mean someone was stronger. Goblina interrupted, saying that there was something more important. She wanted to test what could be summoned through Idyll's bond with the dog. She claimed no one could summon anything as useful as she could. Urshiva's blood boiled at that statement, demanding she explain what she meant. Idyll chuckled nervously, unsure how to calm the two down. To break the tension, he suddenly used bond summoning, instantly silencing them both. To everyone's surprise, he had summoned dog food. Idyll stared at the brown orbs in confusion, not understanding what they were. Urshiva and Goblina were even more puzzled, asking what the item was. Without hesitation, Urshiva and the wolves dove in, devouring the dog food. Idyll was stunned that they were actually eating it. He hadn't even realized it was food. Curious, he considered trying it himself, but Golene quickly warned him that doing so would compromise his dignity. Urshiva turned to him, praising the dog food. Not just the land and water, she said, but even the way he provided so much delicious food. She claimed the Jail Wolf tribe would gladly fight to the death for Idyll. Idyll smiled, thinking that from their perspective, this was paradise. And if that was the case, the other magical beasts might be drawn to him as well. Just then, a fierce tiger approached the group. With its companions, it introduced itself as part of the Fierce Tiger tribe. The leader stepped forward and gave her name, Niafu Harder. Niafu what now? She announced that cats loved high and warm places and demanded that Idyll hand over the land. However, Idyll didn't hesitate and he signaled Golene. Golene swiftly activated her powers, obliterating the tiger tribe on the spot. Meanwhile, at the Jiraha family estate, Idyll's father declared that they were the source of a capable bloodline. He had heard of the many accomplishments of his sons, and because of that, he believed the future of the royal capital's knights would likely be led by the two brothers. That said, he had a request. However, before he proceeded, he noticed that the brothers were unamused and asked what was wrong. Exar spoke up, saying he had a question. He wanted to know if their father truly disowned Idyll. Without hesitation, their father confirmed it, saying it was too late to tell them right when it happened. Idyll, he claimed, was a burden to the Jiraha family, and so he severed ties with him for good. On the bright side, the rest of the family was still together. Smiling, he invited the brothers to join him for dinner. However, Exar was furious. He cursed at the old man, telling him not to mess with him. Their father was stunned, clearly not expecting that kind of reaction. Exar couldn't believe he had disowned Idyll, his own son. Their father tried to justify that compared to Zekt and Exar, Idyll was nothing. Thanks to the brothers' achievements, he had gained status and popularity in social circles. Idyll, despite being his child, was just a useless ingrate. He snapped, calling him a pig-headed fool. He claimed that Idyll would eventually surpass him, even if it took time. Their father demanded to know how he could speak to his own father like that. But Exar didn't back down. He asked if their father even knew what class Idyll belonged to, then answered himself it was the golden 13th generation. Surrounded by powerful classmates and being expected to always be first was harsh for Idyll. Zekt chimed in, adding that Exar's top rank only made their pig of a father more arrogant. Exar continued, saying he couldn't read his father's mind when compared to someone as exceptional as Zekt, even if his results surpassed his best efforts. Like his elder brother, he was expected to always be number one. That must have made things unbearable for someone like Idyll. He was shunned from a young age, beaten, and always publicly humiliated by constant comparisons to his brothers. But despite that, Idyll never gave up. Exar admitted he regretted not recognizing that effort sooner. He smirked bitterly at their father, asking if he truly thought he was just a clueless child. Then, Exar revealed something. At a recent gathering, he met a gentleman around his father's age. That man told him about his father's student days, how he barely ranked in the top 40. That's why he could so easily demand excellence now. He never knew what it was like to be crushed by expectations. Damn, that's gotta burn. Exar then made his decision. If Idyll was disowned, then he too would sever ties with their father. All he wanted was to be free from the pressure. Their father couldn't believe what he was hearing, so he reminded Exar that he was his proud son. Just then, Exar turned to Zekt and asked if he had any objections. Zekt, however, was indifferent. He had only come because he thought their mother had summoned him. He didn't expect a confrontation. To him, matters like these were trivial and unrelated to his mission. Then without a word, he left the room. Their father called after him, but Zekt didn't look back. Meanwhile, Exar remained lost in thought, wondering where Idyll was. Wherever he was, he wouldn't let him stay alone. Meanwhile, in the Idyll near Great Tree Sea, Idyll noticed that various races were preparing to claim the land for themselves. To prevent conflict, he needed to form contracts with them, just like he did with the Jail Wolf tribe. At the same time, the wolves and tigers had started bickering. Urshiva insisted that the Jail Wolf tribe had pledged loyalty to Idyll first. But Nyafu, now in her demi-human form, argued that usefulness was more important. She claimed that the tiger tribe was far superior to any dog-like race. Observing the two, Idyll realized that discord had already begun to take root. Fortunately, he had a way to deal with it. He called Nyafu forward and summoned a treat through their bond, liquid snacks for cats. Nyafu eagerly opened her mouth to receive her reward, overwhelmed by how delicious it was. This would go south if we weren't seeing pictures. Urshiva scoffed, finding it pathetic that someone could be swayed by food. It seemed cats like her lacked even a shred of pride. But then Idyll turned to Urshiva with a smile. He had something for her as well, liquid snacks for dogs. He handed it to her, but Urshiva hesitated, worried that eating it would make her look like a cat. Still, Idyll calmed everyone down, urging them not to fight. Just then, Golene stepped in, reminding Idyll to stop wasting time playing with beasts and focus on their next course of action. Idyll informed the girls that he would be returning to town, leaving them all shocked and pleading for him to stay. They wanted to be together forever. Frustrated, Idyll insisted that he would return once everything was sorted. Urshiva offered to go with him, promising to protect him from any danger. Just then, Idyll explained that the bond summoning technique had been tested to some extent. There were 5 summoning beasts, and if they continued their research, there were still many things they lacked to live there comfortably. Thanks to Urshiva and Nyafu, their combat strength would increase. However, the things they could summon through the contract were nothing more than toys. The log house was an improvement over the wilderness, but for long-term living they would need furniture. That's why Idyll was counting on the girls to watch over the place while he was gone. Hearing this made the girls panic, but they had no choice. In the end, Urshiva agreed to take care of the place while Idyll was away. She then proposed that someone should take charge in his absence, to which Idyll agreed. Urshiva insisted that she should be the one to take on that leadership role. Nyafu, not to be left out, chimed in, saying that she too wanted to volunteer. As the leader of the royal tiger tribe, she claimed she was the most suitable. Urshiva was furious, reminding Nyafu that as a feline creature, she would prioritize herself over the group. She argued that wolves, in contrast, unite to hunt and survive, maintaining strict rules and a clear hierarchy to lead the pack. Nyafu dismissed Urshiva's remarks, calling her annoying, and insisted that she would lead the group in a more relaxed and laid-back manner. Idyll grew even more concerned, knowing that he needed to choose a new leader while he was away. However, choosing between them seemed like a bad idea. After some thought, he declared that the one he trusted most among his bond was Slappy. The slime would be their new leader, leaving the girls baffled. He literally gave the promotion to a sentient jello cup. Urshiva reluctantly yielded, saying she had no choice if Slappy was the chosen leader. Nyafu also agreed, stating that Slappy was the most suitable. Meanwhile, Slappy made unintelligible noises, as if asking them to take good care of him. Idyll felt relieved as the matter had been quickly settled. Golene congratulated Slappy, saying there was nothing to worry about now that he was in charge. Idyll was surprised, as Golene seemed to place boundless trust in the slime. Urshiva teased Golene, remarking that she was surprisingly mature. Meanwhile, Nyafu implied that not running for candidacy showed a lack of spirit. Golene simply said she couldn't serve as a substitute leader. Urshiva questioned if that was humility, warning that such an attitude would make it difficult to stand beside the master. Golene simply smiled and said she would go with Idyll. Idyll confirmed it, then summoned the external equipment type eagle. Just then, the aircraft appeared before them. Of all the external equipment Golene could connect to, this one was specifically designed for ground combat, a reinforced equipment model built for aerial movement. With the eagle, they could traverse the skies, and what would have taken days on foot could now be completed in a single day. Urshiva immediately claimed she would pilot the aircraft, calling it an Iron Bird. However, Golene explained that the reinforced equipment could only be operated by her. Its control system and power source were integrated within her. Idyll agreed, saying Golene appeared human and was best suited to accompany him. That seems kinda racist. The others would stay behind and follow Slappy's instruction. Urshiva was frustrated more than ever, as they couldn't go with Idyll or even lead in his absence. Nyafu gave in, saying they had no choice but to earn everyone's trust. With that, Idyll told the girls he would be leaving and would return by nightfall. Just then, Golene told Idyll to wrap himself around her, surprising him. She explained that she wouldn't be able to carry him properly if he didn't follow instructions. Idyll panicked, asking if he could hold onto her back or legs instead. However, Golene pointed out that those options carried a high risk of him being shaken off. She planned to fly at maximum speed to complete the round trip quickly. and for safety, he needed to be secured with her. The most reliable option was for him to be placed in the cockpit area. Idyll protested, saying it was far too narrow. If only one person could fit, adding another one would make the place cramped. Golene explained that the aircraft was designed this way so there was no helping it. She insisted that 2 people could still fit. Just then she promptly pulled Idyll aboard, urging him to hurry. Before he could protest, he found himself lying on Golene's gigantic melons. As the aircraft began to take off, Idyll wondered if they were really going to travel in that state. But Golene made it clear they were already departing. Down below, Nyafu noticed Idyll's absence. Urshiva, while initially worried, believed they would be alright. Oh, he's more than alright. Eventually, Idyll and Golene arrived at their destination. Idyll thought he was going to die, but the softness and scent of a girl felt heavenly. He then announced that the flight had ended and asked if he enjoyed the ride. Idyll confirmed it down to the marrow of his bones. She then informed him that there was still a bit of distance to the human village. They had parked the aircraft away from the settlement to avoid causing confusion if it were seen. That was also why Idyll wanted to give Golene a mantle. Clothing reflected social values, and her outfit could easily be mistaken for underwear. She would draw too much attention, and the idea made Idyll uncomfortable. For now, they'd use the mantle and purchase proper clothing later. Golene was surprised, as the mantle was one of Idyll's personal accessories. Idyll tried to downplay his reasons, simply stating he wanted to see her wear it. As he draped the mantle over her, she thanked him for his kindness. In return, she promised to carefully choose the cutest clothes for him. Idyll was left confused because this wasn't what he meant. Not long after, they made their way to the village. As they entered, Golene noted its primitive appearance and the civilization's clear lag behind the era when she was created. Changing the subject, she suggested they pick clothes together, thinking Idyll might enjoy that. Idyll agreed, but pointed out they also needed furniture. However, he admitted he was too broke to buy anything. Golene asked if he used to be a financier, reasoning that even if he defaulted on loans, debt collectors wouldn't chase him into the depths of the Great Tree Sea. Idyll was baffled and quickly shut down that idea. Now hold on a minute, brother, she's onto something. After that, they headed to the Adventurers Guild. As they arrived, Idyll wanted Golene to purchase some materials for him. The moment they entered, the old man who cared for Idyll recognized her, pointing him out immediately. Idyll was stunned as he thought this man worked at the Royal Capital Branch. The old man began screaming, explaining he had transferred here out of worry for Idyll. It had been 4 months since. Idyll was shocked because it had only felt like weeks to him. The old man recalled that it had been declared a disaster, and there was even a search quest for Idyll on the board. Sure enough, the quest was posted, offering 4,000 G to anyone who found him. Idyll couldn't believe that Jirahas issued a search quest as he had already been disowned, but the old man clarified that this wasn't about them. The quest was issued 3 months ago and there hadn't been a single lead. He had assumed Idyll was dead. Touched that someone was still worried about him, Idyll tried to comfort the old man. Just then, Golene asked if she could receive the reward immediately if she accepted the quest. Idyll said it would be unfair and asked the old man to take it down. Instead, Idyll asked if the reward could be exchanged for something else. The old man was confused. There didn't seem to be any goods available in the area. To prove him wrong, Idyll summoned a large box from thin air, shocking the old man. From the box, Idyll pulled out a kill club, a weapon harvested from a security-type monster, with a shell so hard that novice adventurers couldn't even scratch it. Such items were highly valued for crafting weapons and armor. He had 57 of those. In addition, he had 107 armor fish and several adamantite ores, all processed and ready to go. The old man was overwhelmed. He hadn't expected such materials to come from the Great Tree Sea. He then asked Idyll if he had ventured deeper than guild regulations allowed. Concerned, Idyll asked if that came with penalties. The old man said no, but going that deep was usually going to lead to death. Survivors from the unexplored zones were also bombarded with questions. Idyll thought that would be a hassle, so he asked him to keep quiet about it. The old man couldn't believe it. Idyll hadn't changed at all. He remarked on the impressive quality of the items, then questioned how they could all fit in such a small box. Idyll explained that it warped space, an object capable of storing large volumes. Curious, the old man asked if it could truly summon things that didn't exist in their world. Idyll confirmed it and said the Great Tree Sea was the perfect environment for his ongoing research. Hearing this, the old man was relieved. Idyll had finally found something he truly wanted to pursue. He told the boy to do as he liked because nothing was holding him back anymore. With that, the old man prepared to exchange the loot for cash, offering the highest possible price to celebrate their reunion. With that, Idyll told him to begin the appraisal while he killed some time. At a nearby clothing store, Idyll told Golene to buy whatever she liked. Money was no concern. She picked out a revealing dress, claiming it was for him. Idyll was stunned, thinking it was far too revealing. She then selected lingerie, which only made him more mortified. Shortly after, she finally settled on a maid outfit. Idyll asked why, and she said it was standard attire for a servant. Idyll finally approved of it because at least it didn't expose much skin. Then he told her to set it aside for purchase later. Soon after, they returned to the old man, only to be met with an unexpected bow. He apologized, saying he could no longer accept purchases of summoned materials. Idyll asked the old man for his reasons, and the man explained that they were caught in the middle of the appraisal, and the process was stopped. The guild found it abnormal that there was a mountain of materials not obtained from the Great Tree Sea. When the old man mentioned it, Idyll realized it was true. Considering how surprised the old man was, it made sense that the guild staff became suspicious. To make matters worse, the issue was brought to the branch manager of the guild. Idyll expressed concern, but the old man admitted there was nothing he could do in this situation. Now the guild manager wanted to meet the person who had directly brought in the materials. They claimed that unless they met that person, they couldn't process the exchange. Panicking, the old man asked what they should do. Idyll considered just going back to the forest, but that would mean giving up the furniture and clothes. In the end, he decided to meet with the guild manager. In exchange, he demanded that the guild process the materials after the meeting. Not long after, they met with Ogians, the branch manager of the Adventurers Guild in the frontier town of Botris. Ogians explained that over 90% of the Great Tree Sea remained unexplored. Through the courage and efforts of adventurers, it was a land that would gradually be charted. Because the town sat so close to the forest, the local guild had an important role in recording everything related to it. However, the materials Idyll brought in were completely different from anything known in the Great Tree Sea. For example, the Kill Club hadn't been discovered in the forest, and its hard shell would normally be part of a B-rank quest, considering its size. The other materials, adamantite, ore, and airy glass, were all top tier and previously unknown. Ogians asked Idyll if he really defeated those monsters in the Great Tree Sea. If he did, they would have to rewrite the records. Just then, Ogians admitted he couldn't believe it. He was convinced Idyll was lying. That seemed more realistic. Offended, Golene stood up and declared that her master would never lie. She told Ogians not to blame Idyll just because of his lack of recognition skills. She then insisted that the materials were absolutely obtained from the Great Tree Sea. Not wanting things to escalate, Idyll calmly told her to settle down. Ogians apologized for being rude. Then he explained that given the extraordinary results, it was only natural to doubt them. Once again, he asked if Idyll had reached deep into the Great Tree Sea. Idyll asked if he'd be scolded for that, but Ogians said no. It was the responsibility of each adventurer, but he couldn't ignore the fact that Idyll had returned from an unexplored region. That was why he had been summoned. There was something Ogians wanted to confirm. The fact that Idyll had returned from the unexplored region meant he had the necessary abilities. Ogians estimated that Idyll should be at least A or S rank, but according to the guild's records, he was only E rank. An E-rank adventurer shouldn't have been able to return from such a place. At that moment, the old man stepped in, wanting to explain. There were reasons behind Idyll's low rank. In truth, he was a student at the night school. Having a student working part-time as an adventurer could damage the school's reputation, so Idyll kept a low profile by staying E-rank. Just then, Ogians pointed out that staying deep within the Great Tree Sea for months meant Idyll had been neglecting his studies. The old man was stunned, realizing this was true. Suddenly, Idyll admitted it himself that he had been expelled from the night school. They told him his abilities and motivation didn't match what the school was looking for. Ogians was surprised, and he realized the people at the school failed to see the value in someone capable of returning from the Great Tree Sea. Idyll bluntly explained that since he had been expelled, he figured he might as well do what he wanted. That was why he went to the Great Tree Sea. At that moment, Ogians made his thoughts clear. They couldn't allow someone as capable as Idyll to remain at E-rank and act as he pleased. He had to take the promotion exam as soon as possible. Ogians wanted him to hold a rank that matched his actual abilities. Idyll was taken aback by the sudden demand, thinking that he had only come to exchange materials. However, Ogians reassured him that the exam wasn't as grand as it sounded. It would conclude that same day, taking Idyll's past achievements into account. Idyll wasn't happy about it. He didn't want to stand out. To him, becoming a high-ranked adventurer didn't seem like it would bring anything good. Just then, Golene encouraged him to take the exam. Idyll didn't understand why she was so eager, but she explained that it was a good thing for her master's abilities to be recognized. He would earn the respect of many people, and she believed that's how it should be. The old man suddenly became emotional. He said that someone like him, who had always been a wallflower, could finally stand where everyone could see him. The thought brought tears to his eyes, but Idyll didn't understand why he was so moved. "Chill out, Pops, you're not the MC." Idyll asked if there was any other option, but Ogians told him that if he refused to take the exam, they'd have to assume he had no intention of working as a proper adventurer. In that case, they couldn't proceed with the material exchange, and it would be best to return the offerings as they were. Left with no other choice, Idyll agreed to take the exam. It was better to just get it over with. Golene asked again if he truly intended to take the exam, because if he did, Climbing the ranks would be easy for him. The old man added that although Idyll was reluctant, a high adventurer rank came with preferential treatment. Idyll looked confused. So the old man explained that it meant taking on high difficulty quests solo or gaining the right to lead a clan. He also mentioned the funding. If Idyll took on high difficulty quests, the guild would provide substantial funds in advance to prevent failure. The thought of getting money shocked Idyll. Somehow, that gave him a bit of motivation. Later on, Idyll arrived at the examination venue along with the other adventurers. O'Giants explained the rules, saying that from that point on, they would hold one-on-one mock battles. He turned to Idyll and reminded him that, as an E-class adventurer, he'd be fighting against a D-class, one rank above. However, O'Giants made it clear that he was hoping Idyll could reach at least B-class. Then, with a glance, he told Idyll that an A-class opponent had been prepared specifically for him. Idyll tensed up. He wasn't confident in this kind of combat. He wanted the money, but he didn't want to ruin his peaceful life by standing out. He needed to aim for the right class and make sure he didn't lose. Just then, Golene called out to Idyll saying that she would also do her best for her master. She insisted on helping, explaining that she was a combat force created by Idyll's technique. However, Idyll was sure that people would freak out once they saw the golem, so he decided to reject her. Golene was confused, explaining that in battle, putting in everything was the golden rule for victory. Idyll explained that he wanted to keep the bond summoning technique a secret, and more importantly, Golene's true nature as well. With that, O'Giants officially announced the beginning of the test. One adventurer approached Idyll saying he had heard Idyll came from unexplored territory. He had expected someone tough but was surprised at how small he was. Idyll smiled awkwardly, thinking that the onlookers must have leaked his information from somewhere. It seemed that no matter how much he ate, he couldn't gain size due to his body type. The adventurer commented that this was also a decent quest, and if Idyll won, he would receive a reward. However, he warned that he wouldn't let him win easily. Idyll acted coy, thinking it would be unfair if he didn't receive a single penny in case he lost. The adventurer seemed offended, knowing that if Idyll won, he would be promoted and gain honor. Then he suddenly lunged at Idyll, shouting furiously for him to die. Idyll easily dodged the attack and in an instant gained the upper hand. He held a knife to the adventurer's throat, warning him not to move. The adventurer was horrified, confused about where the knife came from. Idyll smirked, thinking that secrets could also be powerful weapons. The adventurer surrendered, and Idyll called him a good boy. Idyll then looked at the knife with a smile, knowing that it was summoned through summoning magic. To a stranger, it must have looked like it appeared out of nowhere. It was then announced that Idyll was the winner. With that, he was promoted from E rank to D rank. Idyll's next opponent was a C rank ranger. Now more confident, Idyll believed it was an unfavorable matchup for someone like him, who specialized in exploiting openings. Neither side had a finishing move, and the battle dragged on. He took advantage of a momentary lapse in the ranger's concentration and finished it with a swift attack. Once again, Idyll emerged as the winner. Not long after, the test finally ended. The onlookers were glad it was over, calling it boring. Some said it was a dirty fight. Though Idyll was said to be from an unexplored region, they weren't buying it. Unbeknownst to them, Idyll happened to be walking by. Overhearing everything they said, one of them added that if he really came from unexplored territory, he should have shown A-rank level strength. A C rank with only speed should be overwhelming. Idyll remained calm and let them talk. Then Golene approached and handed him a towel, congratulating him for his work. As Idyll wiped his sweat, he thought back to his time in the forest and how he had survived because of the bond summoning technique. Even as a low-ranked C, the examination had been a struggle for him. Now, he thought it was impossible to be promoted to a B-rank adventurer. Just then, Golene interrupted his thoughts, asking if he was right-handed. She apologized in advance in case she was wrong, but pointed out that up until now, Idyll had been using his left hand for both holding weapons and eating. Something about it felt off. Idyll explained that he was originally right-handed, which led Golene to ask why he was now using his left hand. Idyll revealed that he had injured his right hand in a small accident. Although the wound had healed, some after effects remained. He could still hold something light, like a water bottle, but his grip strength was almost gone. It seemed his left hand had completely taken over. Golene observed that he appeared to be struggling in combat, which surprised Idyll. She pointed out that combat used the entire body, so if one part was impaired, it would have an impact. She then bluntly stated that his movements weren't perfect. "Girl, you do it then, since you know everything." Hearing the truth left Idyll discouraged, and he admitted that this was all he had now. Suddenly, Golene told him to use the bond summoning technique through his bond with her. Idyll was confused, knowing that he shouldn't summon the golem in this place. Yet Golene remained silent, as if she weren't accepting any refusal. With that, Idyll honored her request. The screen displayed that Idyll could summon auxiliary drive gauntlets. With that, Golene instructed him to summon and equip it on his right arm. Idyll followed, and the gauntlet automatically appeared on his right hand. At first he thought they were just gloves, but then they began to move on their own. His right hand, which had never fully recovered, had long lost its grip strength. That was what the doctors repeatedly told him. But now, with the gauntlet, all his fingers were able to move. Golene explained that the auxiliary drive gauntlets had been successfully equipped. They detected the electrical currents transmitting neural signals, allowing the sensors to react and the artificial muscles inside to contract and expand as needed. Idyll was overwhelmed, unable to grasp the technical explanation. Golene then clarified that even in ancient civilizations, patients who suffered nerve damage like his existed. The gauntlet was originally designed as a support and rehabilitation tool for such individuals. She was relieved that the summoning worked. Idyll admired the majestic creation, but his thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a messenger who informed him that the next match was about to begin. Idyll was told to proceed to the venue. As he prepared, he gripped a sword in his right hand. It had been years since he was last able to do that. The sword felt like it clung to his palm as if trying to suck into it. His next opponent was Razdor, a B-ranked adventurer. As Razdor readied himself, Idyll noticed that he was using the upper stance known as the Insensu style. The onlookers began murmuring about Razdor, a swordsman with no visible openings. If a C-ranked ranger caused trouble with him, they would surely have no chances of winning. Idyll admitted that the voices from the sidelines were good, but he kept his cool. Even against this opponent, he focused his mind, calm like the surface of a lake. He quickly sensed Razdor's killing intent and countered the swordsman's swift strike. In a flash, Razdor's sword was knocked into the air. He couldn't comprehend how Idyll had managed to land the Exar-style tendril strike. Accepting his loss with a sigh, Razdor admitted defeat. The crowd erupted in cheers, celebrating Idyll's victory. As Idyll's next opponent stepped into the arena, he silently reflected that his promotion to B rank was almost guaranteed. He wondered if his current wins still weren't enough. Just then, his opponent, an A-ranked adventurer named Charlotte, reminded him that one more battle remained. She told him that if he managed to defeat her, his promotion to A rank would be certain. Since he had come this far, she encouraged him to aim even higher. Idyll reminded himself that wishing for things already lost never led to anything good, which was common sense for any adventurer. However, Charlotte countered, saying that if he didn't take the next step, he'd never grasp what he truly wanted. Then Charlotte activated her magic, simultaneously deploying floating magic and fire magic. The scale was immense and Idyll felt overwhelmed. A massive fireball came hurling toward him. Panic set in as he recognized this as a warrior killer tactic. For warriors like him, being kept at a distance rendered them helpless. If he didn't deal with the floating magic first, he'd have no way to attack. Charlotte acknowledged that based on his previous battles, she had identified him as a warrior-class adventurer. Now she would use her sure win strategy against him. Idyll began to feel the weight of fighting one strong opponent after another. This so-called sure win strategy wasn't something easily realized. If it were an ordinary mage, maintaining both floating magic and attack magic would quickly deplete their mana. But Charlotte had been floating effortlessly for a while now, and she continued to unleash powerful fireballs without hesitation. This was the level expected of an A-ranked adventurer. At that moment, Idyll realized that dodging alone wouldn't be enough. He could barely even manage that. Charlotte hovered above Idyll, threatening to crush him if he refused to fight back. Idyll struggled, knowing he couldn't dodge every attack. Just then, a fireball engulfed him, and the heat forced him to let go of his sword. It had become too hot to hold. Charlotte found amusement in the moment, noting that a swordsman without a sword was completely powerless. To her, it was clear Idyll lacked the experience to reach A rank. She wouldn't bother using this defeat to train herself again from scratch. However, Idyll had already faced more than enough setbacks, and the bond summoning technique should respond to that. Drawing on his bond with Goblina and Urshiva, Idyll summoned a compound bond and called forth a sword, the Murame Maru. Charlotte was shocked, and she questioned where he had even hidden such a weapon. However, she remained headstrong, saying that a new sword meant nothing if she stayed out of reach. Suddenly, Idyll infused fire into the blade. Charlotte scoffed, calling it a foolish mistake. The sword's heat would rise again, becoming too hot to handle. But to her surprise, Idyll held the blazing weapon in his right hand, and the magic wasn't affecting him. She could tell just by how confidently he gripped it. He had nullified the magic. Idyll now had a strategy, one specifically meant to deal with magicians who had taken to the skies. He then summoned a knife using his bond with Goblina and hurled it toward Charlotte. As she struggled to dodge the knives, she questioned what he was even throwing towards her. Idyll revealed it was a specially made knife, meant to counter those who had no means of attacking from long range. He then mockingly asked Charlotte if she was even serious about her so-called strategy. Charlotte was in disbelief, recalling that Idyll had moved like a traditional swordsman earlier in their fight. Idyll mocked the idea, calling her approach childish and heretical. Ever since being expelled from the night school, he'd learned everything through trial and error. The bond summoning technique was just another product of that journey. And now, the magic cost of summoning the knife was something he could easily manage. With practically unlimited bullets at his disposal, he launched knife after knife without stopping. Charlotte struggled to evade the relentless barrage. She eventually lost focus and fell from the sky. As she tried to make sense of what had just happened, Idyll pointed his sword at her, welcoming her to his range. With no other choice, Charlotte admitted defeat. The crowd erupted in cheers for Idyll, overwhelming him. The old man rushed to his side, praising his efforts and saying he knew Idyll could win. O'Gions also offered his congratulations. It was now clear that Idyll had proven himself worthy of being an A-rank adventurer. With that done, only the S-class remained. They gotta cut my boy some slack. Idyll was stunned, asking if he was really expected to keep fighting. Thankfully, O'Gions explained that since there were no active S-class adventurers available for immediate combat, that being said, he would apply for Idyll's promotion directly to Guild HQ. Once a response came in, he would be expected to challenge the S-class. Idyll wasn't thrilled at the idea. Reaching A rank had already made him conspicuous, and S rank would only draw more attention. However, that concern could wait. For now, he wanted O'Gions to proceed with the material exchange. Meanwhile, in the hidden depths of the Great Tree Sea, Exar began his pursuit. Even in a place as secretive as this, he was determined to find Idyll. 3 years ago, just before graduation, he witnessed a scene he never imagined he'd see. Idyll was kneeling helplessly before the prince. He never thought things would come to that extent. In the night school's annual tournament during the final match, Idyll once again finished as runner-up for the second year in a row. His opponent was the fourth prince, Mashuhada, who claimed victory for the second time. The golden 13th generation continued its reign, the geniuses among geniuses. Then, the match began. Idyll gave it everything he had while the prince remained calm and unshaken. Idyll suddenly swung his sword, managing to force the prince to fall back. The prince was amused. Meanwhile, Exar was in awe because the genius prince had evaded the attack flawlessly. As the tension escalated, the prince launched a series of swift attacks. Idyll held his ground, but the prince landed a clean hit, slicing the back of Idyll's right hand. The pain left Idyll stunned. From the crowd, Exar noticed that the weight of that one blow was different. Idyll faltered, wondering if this would be yet another loss. However, the image of his father's disappointed face flashed in his mind. He knew the man expected victory, and failure, he was told, could only be forgiven twice. There would be no third chance. Determined, Idyll struck back. Unfortunately, the prince's talent far exceeded his own. With one powerful move, the prince brought Idyll to the ground. His father's words echoed in his mind. Win the championship. Show the pride of the Jiraiya family. Still, the fire hadn't gone out in Idyll's eyes. He stared up with defiance even as Exar silently urged him to give up. Bloodied and kneeling, Idyll looked up as the prince smirked and declared that time was running out. In that moment, Idyll reflected on how far he had gone to meet his father's impossible demands. The prince's relentless offense had worsened the injury on his right hand. The damage was so severe he could no longer hold a sword with it. As expected, his father showed no mercy. He punished Idyll for what he called a disgraceful defeat and disowned him. From that day forward, everything changed. It wasn't just his body that broke, but his spirit too. The sword training he once did every day without fail came to a stop. He spent his days in a haze, hollow and numb, repeating the same lifeless routine. Eventually, he gave up his dream of becoming a knight and left home behind. With Prince Mashuhada's skill, Idyll might have been able to stop his brother. But perhaps those called geniuses, like Idyll's older brother Zechtwalis, lacked empathy altogether. After that, Exar decided to cut ties with his stupid father and went in search of Idyll. He had obtained information that Idyll had entered the Idyll near Great Tree Sea. While continuing his night duties, Exar began searching in parallel. He was assigned to the frontier town of Botrinus, near the Idyll near Great Tree Sea. Exar had once asked his father where Idyll was, but got no answer. Someone like Zechtwalis could have handled something like this easily, but Exar wasn't a genius. Day after day, he chased after his brother, who had no room left to spare, all while being pushed by their father. In his frustration, Exar thought he should have taken better care of his younger brother. One time, Exar was drinking at a local pub when he was approached by the old man who had once taken care of Idyll. The man jokingly called him out for drinking too much for someone his age, then asked if he was doing okay. As he served a meal, he expressed surprise that a knight from the central area had come to such a remote town. Curious, the old man asked why he had moved there. Exar confirmed it and even joked that his father wouldn't bother going to such a remote place. He remembered the look on his father's face when he said he was cutting ties with him. The man panicked at the thought of Exar going astray as a new knight. It was like a demotion, and rising through the ranks in the central area would now be impossible. Exar shared all this with pride, but also made it clear that he still had plans he needed to follow through with. The old man suddenly burst out laughing, which confused Exar. The man explained that they were actually very similar, but the only difference was that his own family had followed him. He really rubbed that on Exarga's face. Just then, Exarga shared that he was actually looking for his younger brother. The old man asked how old his brother was, and Exarga said he was 15 with dark hair. The man replied that it was a coincidence because he was also looking for someone like that. At that moment, they both said Idyll's name at the same time, leaving them shocked. The old man asked if he knew Idyll, and Exarga responded that he was his younger brother. A few months later, the old man and Exarga met up again. The old man asked how things were going, and Exarga said everything was still the same. On the old man's end, there was no new information either. He apologized, but Exarga waved it off. He explained that if he hadn't met the old man, he never would have considered looking into the adventurer side of things. Exarga had just discovered that Idyll was a well-known figure in adventurer circles. One adventurer said that if Idyll hadn't helped him, he would have been dead. Another said Idyll was good at sinking breaths, and in their party he moved like a true partner. Another swore that Idyll was the standard on the front lines. Others said he could handle almost anything, which was his strength. Though according to Idyll himself, he was just all around, not particularly great at anything. Some even said he didn't seem like an all-around genius, more like an all-around average. Hearing all this made Exarga realize that Idyll, who was considered a failure in the night world, was actually highly respected in the adventurer community. Exarga admitted it was ironic that he hadn't even known about his younger brother's achievements. Then, the old man revealed something he had kept to himself. It had been several months since Idyll entered the Great Tree Sea realm. The Idyll Great Tree Sea was known as one of the most dangerous places in the world. Still, Exarga didn't falter. He swore he wouldn't give up. He would find Idyll and tell him that there were people who cared about him, that he wasn't alone. With that conviction, Exarga set his sights on the Idyll Great Tree Sea. Meanwhile, Idyll had returned to the Idyll Great Tree Sea where the girls rushed to greet him. Urshiva begged him to scratch their backs, while Nyafu asked for a scratch at the base of her tail. Sis is just unhinged at this point. As they crowded around him, Golene quickly stepped in. She ordered them to step back, reminding everyone that their master was tired from the trip. Nyafu then noticed Golene's new outfit and asked about it. Golene smirked, saying it was a symbol of loyalty to their master. She explained that it was a servant's duty to ease their master's fatigue. Just then, Golene asked Nyafu if she was jealous of the outfit. Nyafu didn't care and only said that clothes were stiff and uncomfortable. Golene worried about Nyafu rejecting civilization, while Idyll simply reminded Nyafu that he'd appreciate it if she at least wore her clothes. Suddenly, Golene turned to Idyll and urged him to go to the exposition. Then, from a space-warping box, Golene pulled out a tablecloth, a cushion, and an umbrella stand. Idyll was stunned. He had no idea Golene had brought along small furniture. Golene said she couldn't resist because they were too cute. She showed off a frog on the umbrella stand, calling it a sophisticated design. Idyll was at a loss for words, so he decided to start arranging the furniture. When they brought out the table, it turned out much larger than expected. It had been made for 10 people, but Idyll had miscalculated the size. Trying not to dwell on it, he planned to move on and set up the bed. However, Golene pointed out that the bed frame and the mattress weren't the same size. Frustrated, Idyll blamed the promotion exam for eating up his time. Golene silently judged his measuring skills, while Nyafu thought the real issue was Golene buying unnecessary things. In the end, Idyll told them to put the items away for now and revisit it all tomorrow. The next day, Goblina built a table that actually fit the dining room. Idyll was surprised she finished it so quickly, so she explained that using the tree-cutting tools was just too much fun. She considered picking up Sunday carpentry, and the result was just as she imagined. Pleased, Idyll suggested bringing the table into the dining room. He asked what to do if it didn't fit through the door, and Goblina told him to stand it upright. He followed her advice and the table slid in perfectly. Happy with the outcome, Goblina asked to bring the chairs in next. Idyll was surprised to see that Goblina had made chairs as well. He asked when she managed to make them, clearly astonished. But instead of feeling proud, Goblina looked offended. She declared that goblins were messengers of destruction and slaughter. Creating things was completely out of character for her. Still, Idyll pointed out that she had done a good job. That only seemed to upset her more, as if it made her seem less intimidating. She reminded Idyll of what she did. However, Idyll only laughed, wondering if those kinds of thoughts even existed. Goblina then revealed that she had done all the preliminary material processing herself. She had gathered everything on her own. Idyll acknowledged she was right. When dealing with animal materials, the blood had to be drained. For plant materials, moisture had to be removed by drying. But handling all of that alone became overwhelming, so he asked Goblina for help. The guild had praised the finished result, saying it was well made. Because of that, the amount they were able to exchange for gold had increased. Goblina now looked satisfied, saying it was only natural since she didn't believe in compromising. Idyll admitted he didn't remember it like that in his memory. He had just been quietly working, focused on doing it properly. Just then, Goblina said that's exactly what she didn't like. Goblins were supposed to stand out in the worst ways possible, and she wouldn't hold back to make that happen. She believed that if those dogs and cats could manage to stand out, there was no reason she couldn't. Then suddenly, Goblina charged toward Idyll, unaware that she was radiating a powerful light. Idyll, caught off guard, had no idea what was going on. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 12. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.